I think we are ready to get started. Welcome to the December 8th meeting of the California Transportation Commission's Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee. Appreciate you all being here today. We do have a full agenda. Our last meeting was in May, and it's been a while since we've met, and a lot has happened in the transportation arena since then, most notably have been the efforts by the state, regional, and local governments to implement Senate Bill 1, and we're going to hear a lot more about SB 1 from CTC staff later today. We always welcome questions and comments from the public, as we have since we started back in the end of 2014. The main purpose of these meetings, of course, is to gather public comment on the issues that we're talking about on the agenda. And there's two places. Item 2, which is coming up, and then item 16. But if there is somebody that wishes to speak on an item, just fill out a speaker slip that looks like this. Ann is over there. She's got them. And we'll be happy to accommodate you. Also, we should let you know that this meeting is being webcast live and will also be posted on the CTC's website. And so before we get started, I want to introduce the Deputy Director for Transportation Planning at the CTC, Garth Hopkins. He has waved Garth. Garth has taken Curtis Vandermolen's spot as the lead staff person for the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee. He's been with the Transportation Commission for 2 years, and prior to that spent over 25 years at Caltrans working on a number of transportation planning related areas. And for those members of the committee that have not yet turned in the little yellow slip that Mr. Finnegan's holding up, you can place your order now so Ms. Johnson can get that in for lunchtime. So with that...
Excuse me, sir. Are we going to do the Pledge of Allegiance before we start?
Would you like us to, sir?
Yes.
Well, why don't we do that right now? Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and why don't you lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we will go ahead and move into item 1 on the agenda, asking Ms. Johnson to please call the roll.
David Chu. Erin Howard. Terry Benzel. Here. Senator Jim Bell. Lee Tin.
Here.
Lisa Bartlett. Here. Lauren Kay. Martin Wax.
Here.
Nidhi Kalra. Pam O'Connor. Richard Marcantonio. Robert Poitras. Steve Finnegan.
Here.
Susan Ornelas. Here. Chair Jim Madaffer.
Here. Thank you very much. We have a quorum of the committee. At this point, we'll move to item 2 on the agenda. We have public comment. We limit public comment to 3 minutes. For those of you that would like to speak, please come up to the microphone at the front. We'll start with Raul Rodriguez.
Another comment for somebody?
Yeah, Ms. Johnson will take that for you.
One moment. How much time did we get?
3 minutes each.
3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'd like to start by thanking you for saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I think it's unpatriotic when they don't do that in our country anymore. There's politicians that refuse to do it, and that's terrible. Anyway, I'd like to start by saying that I oppose the tax on mileage. I think it's unconstitutional that a body of elected or appointed officials are even taking these kind of steps to try to hinder our freedom by putting a tax on our mileage. You have no right to tell me where I can go, when I can go, and how many miles I can drive. That is my constitutional right. You don't have the right to tell me what I can and can't do. This is why we have a constitution, so that we can keep people like you and elected officials from trying to dictate to the American people what we have the right to do. So, I'm trying to get the point across to each and every one of you that some of you people are probably appointed by the governor of California. That doesn't mean that you're above the law. Not one of you has the right to do what you're doing. So I'm asking you to drop this matter, vote no on it, because we don't need this, and we the people have the power to elect and remove officials, even those that appoint you, to what you're doing. So please refrain from trying to hinder and stop our rights, especially on vehicles. We have the right to travel and go wherever we want to go. That is our right under our Constitution. Thank you very much. God bless America and God bless Donald Trump.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez. Our next speaker is Robert Lawton. Following Robert Lawton will be, looks like Fred Banuelos. Mr. Lawton.
Robert Lawton. It's at 2 minutes here.
Yeah, I'm just about to change it.
Okay.
You go ahead and start speaking now. Go ahead.
Okay. Let's be honest. The vehicle mileage tax, which you call the road charge pilot program, is not primarily about raising revenue for roads and bridges. If the 2/3 Democrat majority in the state legislature wanted to raise revenue for road maintenance, they could wait until after the November 2018 general election, and then in January of 2019, that they could increase the gas tax. Your vehicle mileage tax requires billions of dollars in devices on our cars to track the mileage, and billions of added bureaucrats, to administrate the program. So it's not just bureaucracy incompetence. There's something else involved here in this vehicle mileage tax. And I'd like to point out to you that a lot of people live in Victorville, Apple Valley, and commute 60 miles to work in LA. Other people live in Reno Valley, and they're on the roads for about an hour and a half to and from work, if they want to work in Orange County or Los Angeles. And it's going to be a real hardship on these people, to pay the vehicle mileage tax. And if the California wanted to raise revenue for roads and maintenance, they would only have to cancel Governor Brown's monument to his greatness called the high-speed rail. The high-speed rail will never be completed. There will never be a link from Los Angeles or Riverside to Sacramento, because there's two mountain ranges that they would have to tunnel through. And as you know, these two mountain ranges, the going over the Grapevine or going over the mountains into Santa Clarita, those mountains are highly fractured, and tunneling through those mountains is going to be a nightmare, because there's two plates that join, that fractures up the whole, the mountainside. And so this is really a plot to keep people out
It cut you off automatically. I apologize. Fred Banuelos, followed by Gary Galeno, I believe. Mr. Banuelos. Good morning.
Hello. There we go. The vehicle mileage tax is unacceptable. Why do you have these meetings when most people are working? I took the time off to from work to learn more about this issue and voice my concerns. What I see so far is that the government wants money to fix roads. What happened to the original tax money we pay to fix roads? Are you receiving less money because of hybrids? How much of an impact are hybrids making? I don't see a lot of hybrids out there on the road. What I know is that the government is misappropriating the tax. I have concerns with DMV collecting money for the program. Why doesn't Caltrans collect the money? DMV already has enough to do. They are always busy. They have to deal with AB 60 and Real ID. Are people's driver's license and car registration going to get suspended if they don't pay the gas tax? And why are we even talking about this when SB 1 passed? There should be enough tax money to fix the roads. Why is Riverside County Transportation Commission discussing whether to ask voters for a new sales tax? The county already has Measure A. We don't need any new taxes. We need to use the present gas tax for fixing roads and nothing else. I also have concerns about my privacy with this GPS box thing. What makes you think that people won't hack this box and cheat the system? And in closing, I want to say that this vehicle mileage tax is unacceptable. If the government didn't use present gas tax funds for unrelated things, they wouldn't have this problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Gary Galeno, followed by Greg Britton. Gary? Is Gary here?
Yes, right here. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Gary.
Let me see if what do I do with my speech? I had a speech somewhere. Oh, come on. Hold on.
Do you want to just come back? Why don't we get Greg Britton to come up? Mr. Britton, are you here? I am. Yeah, why don't you come up and we'll let Mr. Galeno get organized.
I got it. I'm sorry. My apologies. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead.
Good morning, Technical Advisory Committee. I am here today to let you know that the public is waking up to what you are doing here. This right here is the 2016 SCAG Regional Transportation Plan. This document is a plan to raise our taxes over $500 billion. And do you know what the largest funding mechanism is for this plan? It is what is referred to as a mileage-based user fee, also known as vehicle mileage tax. That's why you are here. You are here to make sure that SCAG steals this money from out of our cars. Now, this document, it is about sustainable community strategy, and it's all about climate change and global warming. So these plans are about fighting climate change. The gas tax that just was passed is in this document. All the toll roads are in this document. The vehicle mileage tax is in this document. So all these taxes that have been raised on us to fix the roads are going to fight climate change. And I've been watching your guys' meetings for the last couple of years, and Ms. Bartlett and Mr. Medaffer, you guys said it yourselves right out of your mouth that the state of California is siphoning the money from transportation and using it for other things. So you guys admitted that the money is being stolen and not being used for the roads. Do you know what the purpose of this plan is besides to fight climate change, or how they actually do fight climate change? It is to redesign all of Southern California so that we no longer live in single-family homes and are no longer reliant on the automobile. This plan is about getting us onto bicycles, buses, and trains, and you guys are facilitating it. If this vehicle mileage tax goes through, you will have your way with us. There will be no more driving cars because no one will be able to afford it anymore. The gas tax just went up. It's going to go up again with cap and trade. Toll lanes are being put in, and all over social media, people are posting $700 and $800 car registration bills. Essentially, what this state is trying to do is they want to make it $10,000 to $20,000 a year just to drive an automobile, which is why you are here to tax us by the mile, because the purpose is to make it so expensive to drive that there is no other choice but to ride in those stupid bike lanes that are being put down everywhere. The people have woken up, and none of you are going to get away with this. And since I still have 30 seconds left, I want to ask one question. You know, we're all adults. People behind me, we know that there's an agenda to get us out of cars. If the agenda is to get us out of cars, then why have we given 1 million driver's licenses to people who are illegally in this country if the plan is to not drive anymore? Are they going to keep driving while we wait at the bus stop? Think about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. We'll go next to Greg Britton, and then Stephen, and I can't quite read this. Is it Quest?
Good morning, members of the Commission.
Hi, Mr. Britton.
We certainly all agree that the state of California roads is terrible, and among the worst in the country. Yet, prior to the latest tax increases, California, counting the cap and trade currently in effect, had the highest gas taxes in the country. Why is that? Why is it in California that it costs 4.7 times more per mile of road built than anywhere else in the country? In a budget of $160 billion, why can't you, the state government, find money to take care of our priority, good roads, or good schools, or having enough water? But there isn't enough money for those type of things. But your answer is, the state's answer is, the government's answer is always to come back and extract more money from the people. Why is that? Government is never expected to be more efficient and effective. Never, ever, ever. I watched some of the video of your May meeting, and I'm saying, well, we'll make sure we're not going to tell anyone that this is about controlling when and where people drive. It's just to raise money. But we know how government operates. No matter what we are promised up front, inevitably, this program will be used to track where and when we drive. Inevitably, this program will be used through variable pricing to control when and where we drive. And inevitably, this program will be a tax increase, not a tax replacement. That is how government works. And none of you can honestly deny any of those points I just made. Now, there's a member on your list here, I don't see him here today, in charge of social equity. The average commute in Southern California is 30 minutes. Within that time, driving by car, you can reach 60 times more jobs than you can by government slower transportation. So we want people to work, and we think we would want people to work. But now with this policy and what Gary just mentioned about trying to get people out of their cars, the lower and middle income people, you're making it harder for them to work. You're punishing them for trying to go out and get a job because the housing prices mean you got to live a long way away from where you work. So not only is this bad policy, it invades our privacy, it is unfair to the people that you think you're trying to be fair to by trying to price them out of their cars. This is a terrible idea, and I urge you to do what is right and reject this program and tell the legislature you need to come up with another idea. I'm spending our money wisely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Britton. We'll next go to Stephen, is it Quest? Okay, followed by Luis Reyes.
I'm here to speak against the vehicle mileage tax. As a person who earns his living by making deliveries with my personal vehicle, this would directly impact my ability to earn a living. There is plenty of money in the revenue for building roads. They just have to prioritize building roads above other things. Just like in our personal lives, if we want to spend money on a particular thing, we'll find money in our budget and spend money less elsewhere so that we can spend it on what we want. The government needs to concentrate on making the roads better and spend the money that it already has on the roads and not on things that it doesn't need to spend the money on and probably should not spend the money on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Reyes, followed by Christopher Folger.
Thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Absolutely.
I wanted to come here and express my displeasure with what is going on. This road charge is ridiculous. It's not going to go because we're going to organize. And I'm telling you right now, people are woke. We're going to organize, and a lot of you won't be around because you won't have your jobs. We'll find someone to replace you that does a good job for the people, by the people. And these are the things that I wanted to let you know. This tax that you're going to place on people is really a target on the middle class. And this is horrible because I doubt if any one of you is above the upper middle class sitting right there. So it's going to affect you too, and it's going to affect your children and their children. So I want you to think about what's going on with this. Somebody is trying to put this agenda through that doesn't have the citizens' best interest in mind. California has always been known as a great state, and I'm here to let you know that I'm here to make California great again, and I will do everything I possibly can to organize and to oppose this ridiculous tax, this road mileage tax, and help the citizens of California. And I hope that you go home this evening and think about what I said, and my face sticks in your mind, because you'll probably see it again. I've never been involved in things like this, but I can tell you, I am a good organizer, and I can do it. So please think about what you're doing. I oppose this. California opposes this. The middle class citizens oppose this, and you need to think about the masses that will start waking up, which they're doing right now. The reason you don't have an audience, a bigger audience today, is because you picked a weekday to do this, 10 a.m. in the morning on Friday. A lot of our people are working because they have to work for a living. This tax will impose such a burden on them that you are deliberately, if you vote this in, or if you consider it even, you are deliberately hurting the citizens of California. Please think about what you're doing. Again, people are woke and they're coming up. So I'm sure that you folks, when you go home tonight, and Brian, I'm hoping you're listening to this. I've been watching you while I've been sitting down. I love that smile you have. But please heed my warning. People are woke. The people of California will not stand for this. Trying to help. Thank you so much for giving me this time, and I appreciate what you do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reyes. We'll next go to Christopher Folger, followed by Carolyn Gonzales. Chris?
Hello. I'm reading through this California charge pilot program. I mean, this is just outrageous. Vehicle mileage tax. We already have toll roads that are going to be built. 15 from Cajalco all the way to Highway 395 in Hesperia. We have to deal with the toll lanes and on the 10 freeway, 33 miles of toll lanes, the gas tax. This is a plan to get us out of our cars. I mean, it's pretty clear. It's no surprise. This is just outrageous. Putting devices in our cars, tracking us by the amount of miles that we drive, saying that this is an issue. This isn't an issue of privacy. The fact that you guys know how many miles we drive, regardless of where exactly you went, is an invasion of privacy. So I suggest this committee just drop this matter overall. It's a boondoggle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We'll next go to Carolyn Gonzales, followed by Judy Neil. Morning.
Good morning. Where do I begin? I'm just going to tick off a few things that I was reading on some of the information you put out today. One of the things that struck me was on tab 6, where it indicates one of the objectives is to reduce the reliance on automobiles. Well, what have you proposed for the senior to do? We cannot walk to the market and bring all our groceries home. We cannot walk to go to the mall. We cannot ride a bike. And if we did, and you propose that we all get bicycles, all we need is one good fall, and there goes the hip. We cannot afford to call Uber or Lyft or a taxi. How do we get around? And how much exposure do you give us sitting at a bus stop? We are prime candidates for crimes. We are the people that people like to scam on, to attack, and to rob. Where are you putting our lives with this ridiculous thing? The second thing is, in your memorandum, you indicate that the legislature, should continue pursuing other long-term alternatives. What other long-term alternatives? And now you're saying that this tax may be $1 and 1.8 cents. But then when is it going to be that you're going to tax us or charge us differently because we're driving in prime time rather than at 3 o'clock in the morning? There are no controls in this. And the other things that I want to ask about is, what about the visitors to California? How are you going to charge them? And what gasoline taxes that we're now paying are you going to eliminate? There is a point when all of a sudden taxation becomes without representation. And we're seeing more and more of that. We know what happens when an electorate gets angry, and this electorate is getting very angry. You can only be pushed so far until it's either fight or die or leave. And right now, there's a lot of people leaving. I myself am contemplating doing the same thing. So I just want to wrap up and say this tax is discriminatory against seniors. And I want to ask a question that I just want to just say that you talk about fixing the roads. Why are we going to fix the roads if we're not going to be able to drive our cars?
Thank you very much, Ms. Gonzales. Judy Neil, followed by Greg Allen. And following Greg Allen, I've got Donald Dix. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Judy Neil. I like Carolyn. I'm a senior. I just turned 70 years old. I lost my husband in October. I'm now living on a very fixed income. And for all of you sitting up there, you have to consider what you're doing to the seniors in this state. We've paid our taxes. We've paid our way through every single year that we have lived in this state. Now we have intruders coming into our state, and you're giving them carte blanche on everything. We will have visitors from other states. Like Mrs. Gonzales said, how are they going to be affected by this tax that you're going to be inflicting onto the citizens of this state? My son lives in Nevada. I'm going to have to think maybe twice about taking 2 trips a year. My daughter's moving to Arizona because they're tired of being taxed to death. I have a daughter in Texas. That's where I'm looking to live because you know what? My dollar doubles, almost triples in other states. So for me, it's like, how much more are you going to put on us? How much? Because I can't afford it. And I wanted to die in the state where I was born. But I'm not going to be able to do that because you're forcing people who pay their way out of this state. And I am angry. I have no idea what you're all thinking. We have cap and trade, SB1. You have taxed us this past year to the point of millions of dollars. I'm not going to be able to afford my registration. I'm not going to be able to afford my property tax because of SB 231, the sewer tax. My parcel tax is going to go up almost $1,200 to $1,800 a year. So, sit back and look at what you're doing to the people who pay your wages. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Neil. Let's go next to Greg Allen. Following Greg will be Donald Dix.
Hi, I'm Greg Allen.
John
I'm
Willis.
very angry and frustrated. I get frustrated when my elected officials don't listen to what I have to say. None of you are listening, especially you, Jim. Every person who's been up here, you've been occupied. Excuse me, don't interrupt me. I won't interrupt you. So I'm going to continue with that. You have been looking at some business in front of you for the whole time. Every single person's been up here to talk. You are an outrageous person to think that your agenda should be imposed on all of us. Secondly, how many of you here can afford an electric car? Because I guess the rich people who can afford an electric car will be able to travel the road without paying any taxes. This is an unfair tax because all these people who own electric cars aren't going to be paying it. Now, Jim, I wish you would pay attention, because that's your job here. We pay you to do. Don't interrupt me. Now, I asked you to pay attention. There's a few people here not paying attention, Pam, and the rest of you, I like the way you pay attention. Stephen, you especially, I've noticed that you've listened to everybody, and Brian, of course. But Jim, you're an outrageous individual. You're a politician. You're supposed to listen to the people, and the people are telling you not to do this tax. Every last person around here has had that view. But you, sir, are ignoring us. Every time somebody comes up here, you're not paying attention. Now, that's why I'm angry and frustrated, because my elected officials are not paying attention to me. Now, electric cars, they're for the rich people. The rich people can afford not to pay this tax. A tax is a tax is a tax. By any other name, it's a tax. We don't need new taxes. We've been imposed upon these taxes already. All these last-minute bills that got cap and trade and all the rest of them. You know, the tax just went up 12 cents a gallon. What are you thinking? You don't represent the people when you want these. Pay attention, Jim. Pay attention. I'm talking. You're supposed to listen to me. You're supposed to respect what I have to say. You're supposed to give me my lousy 3 minutes, and you're supposed to respect me. But by you occupying your nose everywhere else but what the people have to say is the real contempt in this room today. You're contemptuous. And we're angry. And we want you to vote in the way of the people. And if you don't, the people have other options. We still can carry guns if we have a right license. We can find out, who's voting yes on these things and go around to your neighborhoods and fill out a little brochure to all your people in your neighborhood. And we'll just give them a little note saying what you're up to, Jim. That's for sure for you. Send out about 100 of them. Your neighbors will hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen, for your comments. Donald Dix, followed by John Willis. Good morning.
Is this working? There it is.
You're on.
I wore my Santa hat today. Thought I'd bring a little Christmas cheer into the room. Because I understand there's a lot of Grinches out there that want to steal Christmas from the people. And that's been happening all year long under the supermajority that we've had in Sacramento. People have mentioned SB1 and cap and trade. These are things that are being done in order to, I believe, paper over the real problem. And the real problem is that the money that we're already paying is not being used in the way that it's supposed to be used. I traveled up to Lake Tahoe not too long ago, and another family member did, but they continued on into Carson City into Nevada. And over the table, they remarked, they didn't even know what they were referencing. They said, man, as soon as you get into Nevada, the roads get so much better. And I said, isn't it amazing that Nevada can produce better roads than California with less money? Why is that? Well, I think the secret's starting to get out. The secret is that we have this massive unfunded pension liability that's stealing money from other buckets and being used in order to prop this up. We have a pension system that's unsustainable. The left loves that word, unsustainable. Things are unsustainable. You hear that no matter what the issue is, it's unsustainable. The pension system in California is unsustainable. Corporations gave up the idea of a defined benefit plan back in the early 80s, and that's why 401k and defined benefit plans were introduced. Somehow the state of California hasn't figured out that defined benefit plans are unsustainable. Every city, every municipality is looking at ways to shore that up. My own city of Corona is looking at adding an additional penny to sales tax in order to meet their pension and benefit obligations. Unsustainable. The money that we've been paying in gas taxes all along, the highest in the nation, sixth highest until it was just raised, was being used for other purposes. Obviously not to pay for the roads, because if you used all this money to pay for the roads, we would have roads of gold. The roads in California would be immaculate. But the money hasn't been used for that. The money's been used for other purposes. And now we have SB 1. We've raised gas taxes. We have cap and trade. More taxes. What's that money going to be used for? Is it going to go to roads like has been promised? Oh, I've heard about the lockbox, but I've heard about lockboxes before. Somehow bureaucrats find their ways around lockboxes. We know. That's the anger you're hearing today. And somebody made the point that this room would be a lot fuller if this hearing was after hours and people can work. None of these people are getting paid to be here. Are you? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dix. We'll go next to John Willis, followed by Van Chung Huang, I believe. Mr. Willis.
Yes, I'd like you to go home tonight and call Jerry and tell him I'm taxed enough already. You know, I just had to go to San Bernardino yesterday and pay my property taxes. Now my gas taxes have gone up. They want to make the freeways toll roads, and now you want to charge me by how many miles I drive? My son just bought a home. Guess where he had to buy it? 30 miles from his house, because you probably also like open borders policies, which has inflated housing prices and rental prices. So now he's got to commute to work. So now he has to pay another tax because he can't afford to live close to his job. I don't know what you guys want from us or what you think we have to offer, but I'm taxed enough already. I can't do it anymore. And you can't chase everyone out of California. Pretty soon we're going to get sick of it and we're going to revolt. We're not having it. And you, Mrs. O'Connor, I saw you on a video make the statement that this tax was more equitable. That is not true, ma'am. Your life is not equitable. It's not fair. We all have to live according to our own works. And you know, your little statement reminded me of that movie, Dr. Zhivago, where poor Dr. Zhivago, after getting conscripted into the commie army, comes back to his home that's now sublet into condos, basically. And that's the statement they made when he walked into his home. And he had to say, yes, this is much more equitable, comrade. We can't pay any more taxes. And it's not even fair to pay more taxes, because what is it going for? You know, on the way over here, one of my fillings got knocked loose because the doggone freeway so tore up. Now, I'm pretty sure that the gas tax pays for that already, right? Didn't we already pay for the roads once? And now the gas tax pays to repair the roads. Why aren't they being repaired? Because like everyone says, it's going for these stupid pensions and for you guys to go out to lunch. We're sick of it. I'm going to remember all your names, and we're going to be going after you. I know you're appointed by Jerry, but we're going to go do our best to go after you, whatever it is. We're not going to have it anymore. I don't know what you're smiling about, ma'am. You think it's funny that I'm getting taxed out of the state? You think it's funny? You know, my kids are having to move out of the state. I have 5 adult children. One of them already left. You're just going to chase us all out? Is that what you're going to do? Or wait for us to die off? Is that your plan? How much are we going to have to pay so you can sit up there and go out to lunch and retire at a nice big fat pension? You think it's funny, do you? I don't think it's funny. I'm outraged. I'm sick of paying taxes. I'm sick of paying for freeloaders. You know, some of these retired people have worked their butts off and done everything their mama told them to do, and they've paid their taxes. Now you want more? How much is enough? I wish one of you would answer me. Nothing? 40%? Is 40% enough?
Thank you, sir, for your comments. We'll next go to Van Chung Huang, followed by Betty Robinson. Hope I pronounced that right.
Sorry about that.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is my first time coming over here, and I actually coming from Torrance, and I currently working at a restaurant, and I'm against any kind of tax right now, because if we are taxed, then business has to raise the price. Then they're gonna lay off a lot of workers. I'm really afraid of this, and I'm seriously opposing any kind of tax. If we are getting taxed to the oblivion, then how can we live over here, sir? And anyone listening to me, I'm really opposing this kind of tax. Yeah, that's only my comment. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. Betty Robinson is our last speaker. Good morning.
Good morning. I fully support like 95% of all of the previous statements. And if this mileage tax measure was placed on a ballot, you know it would not pass. Have you considered the impact of this tax on small businesses who are struggling already? The gas tax was the last straw for many, many people I know, and they're moving out of the state. Pretty soon, who's going to be left to pay all these taxes? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robinson. Probably should just offer, first of all, thank you to all of you that spoke, and I appreciate the decorum. You should all understand that the group that's up here is a group of volunteers that were put in place as a result of the passage of Senate Bill 1077 in 2014. That bill wanted to look into a long-term sustainable funding mechanism as a potential replacement to the gas tax. Senate Bill 1077 created a road charge pilot program as well as a 15-member volunteer technical advisory committee to study, to gather input, and to make recommendations on the parameters of the pilot. This technical advisory committee, as I mentioned, is a group of volunteers from throughout the state with varying expertise. And then during 2015, the technical advisory committee held 11 different meetings throughout the state, and as a result, instituted and California completed the largest road charge research effort to date, piloting more than 5,000 vehicles that reported in excess of 37,000 miles driven over a 9-month period. These statistics really reinforced the desire for mobility and a safe and reliable transportation system. And I understand many of the comments. When it comes to the gas tax, keep in mind that the fuels tax, which was first created in Oregon in 1918, and then implemented here in California in 1922, is based on a 20th century assumption that fuel purchases mirror road usage. And until the advent of hybrids, electric vehicles, and vehicles that are getting 50 and 60 miles to the gallon, vehicles in those days were substantially similar. Everybody used to get just 10 miles to the gallon. Today, we don't see that to be the case. Vehicles, technology, and what California is looking for from transportation system has changed dramatically. And because of those changes, road use and fuel tax payments are really no longer connected. All you have to do is look at the road and you'll see somebody driving that's in a car in the lane next to you is getting 50 miles of the gallon, and if you're in a car getting 12 miles of the gallon, guess what? If you're driving 12 miles of the gallon vehicle, you're paying a lot more than the person in the vehicle next to you. And that's what this is all about long term, is to try to create an equalized system. No decisions have been made, nothing but recommendations. I would encourage each of those that spoke today, and while I respect your comments highly and your upset nature, I would ask you to read the reports and understand again, as I just mentioned, why we're here and the basis for what we are trying to study. So with that, I appreciate your time and the comments. We'll now move into item 3 on the agenda, and that's the approval of the minutes from our meeting of May 9th. Is there anybody making You're out of order. Please leave the room, sir, if you're not going to interrupt.
You're all lapdog.
All right. Thank you for your comments. Do we have a motion for approval of the minutes from May?
Second.
A motion from O'Connor, second from Finnegan. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. All right. The minutes are approved. Let's move to item 4 on the agenda, and that's any reports from members of the TAC committee on any road charge related issues since our last meeting. All right. Hearing none. We'll then move into item 5 on the agenda. And kind of just to recap, as I said earlier, the TAC is basically 2 years old. Our first meeting was held in January of 15, and we can look back and see some of the things that are going on. And as you just heard I mention, and I'm sorry a lot of these folks are leaving because, this is a national issue. And we'll hear a lot more about what's going on throughout the state later on the agenda. But what we're going to be doing today is kind of getting an update on Senate Bill 1. We're also going to hear from Caltrans to get an update on their work on further research on the viability of implementing a road charge here in California. And then the State Transportation Agency just released yesterday the road charge pilot report, which we can also discuss today. And then we're going to look into seeing how the road charge could be implemented for zero-emission vehicles as well as autonomous vehicles. There's several representatives here today from CalStaff, from GoBiz, and the DMV that are going to give us an update on what's currently going on regarding ZEVs and regulations for autonomous vehicles. And then last but not least, we'll have a discussion regarding the development of road charge recommendations that we'll be making to the Full Transportation Commission and talk about some of the meetings for 2018. So with that, that kind of gives an update as to what we're going to be doing today. Mr. Finnegan.
Just a point of clarification. So the report that came out today from CalSTA is a report on the pilot itself. And this group is still contributing efforts, thoughts, and ideas towards a report that will come from the California Transportation Commission with recommendations to the legislature. So I just want to make sure everyone understands sort of where we're at and where these reports sort of fit into this. So just because a report came out today doesn't mean all the work is done. We've got more to do.
That's correct. Okay, so with that, why don't we go into the SB 1 overview. As you know, it was signed into law by the governor on the 27th of April, and there's been a lot of things happening in that area. There's obviously those that want to repeal Senate Bill 1, and obviously we all have our own day jobs. It's important, certainly from the folks we just heard from, we do need to continue to have funds to maintain our transportation system. Just because you build the road doesn't mean it's always going to just be there. It takes money to keep it going. And, Senate Bill 1, in my mind, was a solution really for a short to midterm timing to address the transportation problems. And as I said a little bit ago, while the gas tax works today, we've got to figure out what's going to make sense long-term into the future as we continue to see more fuel-efficient vehicles. And we also know, that in light of this, there's other states that are also looking at road charge as a method of collecting revenue for transportation, and that's why so much of what we're doing continues to be important. So with that, let me introduce Mitch Weiss. He's recently appointed as CTC's Chief Deputy Director, and he's going to give us an update on all the efforts related to Senate Bill 1 and what CTC's been doing in terms of implementing the funding programs. Mitch?
Thank you. Good morning, committee members. SB 1 established the first significant, stable, and ongoing increase in state transportation funding in more than 2 decades, and created a number of programs for the Transportation Commission to oversee and implement, along with stabilizing funding and new funding for a number of existing programs. In attachment B, there is a list of the taxes that SB1 imposed and the implementation dates and amounts of those. The gas tax, as most of you know, went up 12 cents a gallon. The diesel excise tax went up 20 cents a gallon. There was a 4% increase in the diesel sales tax, a transportation improvement fee on cars based on their value, which ranges from $25 to $175 per vehicle, in addition to a stabilization and elimination of what was the price-based excise tax, and a new fee on zero-emission vehicles beginning in 2020. And lastly, beginning in 2020, a indexing of the excise tax to inflation. And lastly, and importantly, a payback of all outstanding transportation loans that had been made to the general fund during the state's economic downturn. I would note that, as you all know, it's been quite a few years since the gas tax was increased before this. In the time between the 2 increases, my daughter was born and graduated from UCLA. So it's just a little perspective on how long that took. The book item contains a summary of each of the programs that SB1 implemented that are under the Transportation Commission's purview and some of the key milestones for those. These programs include the Local Partnership Program, the Active Transportation Program, Local Streets and Roads Program, along with increased funding for the State Highway Operation and Protection Program, and a stabilization of funding for the State Transportation Improvement Program. As of the Commission meeting this week, the Commission has adopted guidelines for all of the programs under its purview. These guidelines will shape the development of approximately $18 billion in transportation investments. Beyond just guidelines, the Commission has approved funding for State Highway Operation and Protection Program projects, Active Transportation Program projects, and a list of cities and counties eligible to receive local streets and roads funding. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mitch? All right. Well then, thank you, Mitch. Hearing none, why don't we go ahead and go to the next item on our agenda, and that's number 7, and that'll get an update from Brian Annis, the Deputy Undersecretary, who's going to give us a little preview and description of the recently released pilot report. Right?
Sure. Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you to the committee. I thought I'd just start out recognizing this very significant milestone of having the pilot completed and the report out, and really recognize the work of the committee, really highlighting 2 significant benefits the committee has provided here. One is definitely the wisdom and the counsel in setting up the pilot itself, but today demonstrates as well the great public service that the committee's providing by having public hearings all around the state. So people have an opportunity to speak and provide input as we go forward on this idea of a road charge as a possible replacement for the gasoline tax. I'm going to ultimately kick off to Carrie, who's going to give a more formal presentation with a quick overview on the report, but did want to mention a few things in advance, and one of those is, as the agenda indicates, let the committee know we have a group of affected or possibly affected state departments and agencies that we continue to talk with over time. The current gasoline tax is something that involves many entities of the state already. The gasoline tax is collected at a earlier distribution point by the Department of Tax and Fee Administration, formerly called the Board of Equalization, or I should say a bit of a spinoff of the Board of Equalization, which does still continue. So they're a party we continue to work with. Also, of course, the Department of Motor Vehicles. We've continued our collaboration with them, and you're going to hear some later in the agenda about some of their work that's ongoing. We also continue to work with the Air Resources Board, who is through their regulatory authority has some requirements for vehicles, and of course is very interested in fuel efficiency in vehicles, and they're a valued partner here that we continue to work with. So, want to let the committee know that that work continues, and I think as more dialogue continues, from time to time, some of these entities will probably want to come before this committee and kind of explain some of the considerations and some of the related things they're working on. Lastly, I did certainly want to recognize and compliment the staff group that did so much good work to accomplish this pilot, really even ahead of the original schedule. I certainly don't take that for granted. You need a lot of good work, a lot of good contract administration, a lot of diligence, a lot of work with the TAC and others, and to make sure that could be accomplished. And I know the agency is very pleased with the results and the good hard work that's gone into all this. So with that, I might go ahead and pass this overview on to Carrie Porvahidi, who's of course the project manager.
Good morning, Chair and TAC members. It's been a pleasure working with you on this, I think, a groundbreaking study, a pilot, looking at a road charge as an alternative to the gas tax. And I do have to do a shout out to my staff, because they have been working tirelessly on getting this pilot done and report done. So thank you, Brady, Bridget, and Stephanie. So driving right into the pilot, I'm not going to, we all know about what's going on with the pilot. You've been there since the inception, why we were doing it. Jim, Chair Madaffer was very thorough in explaining why, what was the purpose, what were we doing. So we'll just jump right into the results, what happened. So as reported back in May, earlier this year in May, that, this pilot had achieved many firsts, having over 5,000 vehicles, demonstrating a variety of different reporting methodologies as well as technologies. And, at the end of the day, driving over a 9-month period, over 37 million miles is pretty impressive. So, diving right into the observations, we wanted to see, the pilot participation and perception. As you recall, you had put together a matrix of participation targets for the pilot. We worked very hard in trying to meet all those buckets that we lovingly call buckets of participants. And for the most part, we were able to meet all of those targets. There were a couple of areas that we had some difficulty in. It was the rural, making sure that we had enough rural representation based on your matrix. But to let you know that we did oversample. We didn't meet the target that you set, but we had much more rural by percentage, per capita percentage than the urban. So we're able to get a good example of what impact it would have on the rurals. The other would be low income. It was a little difficult for us to convert volunteers into participants in the low income range. And it really comes down to having the time and the ability to do a very robust communications outreach and touching base and meeting with those communities. So if we were to do another pilot, it might be something that we need to concentrate on, how to better reach out to those communities. And for the most part, 85%, for the perception aspect of it, we did, as required by you, have an independent evaluator who came in and they measured the technical side of the pilot, but also measured the attitudinal and experiential aspect of the pilot with the participants. So 3 surveys were done. You've gotten reports over the months of what happened with those surveys. We also did focus groups, and for the most part, 85% were happy with the pilot. Over 90% said that they would participate in another pilot. 78% were satisfied with the security of their data, and really 61% felt it was very satisfied with the concept of road charge. So, oops. The other observations were third-party vendors, as requested by the Technical Advisory Committee, of involving third-party vendors to provide the services. We were able to have 4 account managers. Those are your third-party vendors. We had the Azuga, IMS, and E-Road, which were very technologically, had all the bells and whistles, provided the highest amount of technology. And then we had a CalSam, who kind of simulated the state operation, which was more on the manual side. Overall, it was a very good experience. They were able to offer the technological ones, the CAMs were able to provide value-added services, so your geofencing or vehicle health, that type of information to the participant. It was only between the commercial account manager and the participant. The state of California didn't know anything about what services they were using or what types of driving behavior. That was really an agreement between the two, the commercial account manager and the participant. There were some difficulties that we had, and it kind of was more related to our contractual relationship. Due to the time constraints of the pilot, we went through our prime consultant to enter into an agreement with these vendors. So there was an inability to kind of have that direct relationship between the state and the commercial account managers. There could have been a lag in understanding, because now you have a middleman communicating directly with the vendors. In the future, we would like to be able to contract directly with these vendors. If this were to ever become a statewide program, that would be the relationship that should be had, is a direct relationship. And then, as from a participant perspective, 75% really liked their account manager. We didn't hear hardly any complaints. The complaints that we did hear were more about the technology side of it and not necessarily the account manager. For the privacy and data security protection, that was something that was pervasive through the TAC phase, as well as setting up our pilot, running our pilot. That was a primary thing that we wanted to make sure that the privacy and data security protections were in place to make sure none of the personal identifiable information was released or that any of the data was breached. We were successful throughout the pilot, we had no issue. The one thing, the 78% satisfaction, it was a limited pilot. I mean, you have 5,000 vehicles in the pilot. And so to take that data and say, okay, this is how the state attitude, all the state drivers' attitudes, you can't really make that leap. So privacy and data security still needs to be a primary directive for any road charge program, and it needs to be very nimble. So as technology changes and there's more and more security aspects, we need to be able to build those into a program. The pilot observations for mileage reporting methods, remember we had a variety of options. We had plug-in devices, smartphone devices, in-vehicle telematics. Those were our more technological. Then we had a time permit, mileage permit, and odometer. The more manual options are
probably provide, and they do provide the most privacy because you don't really need to give any of your private information. You just buy a permit and drive, or you go into an odometer station and have it read, or you take a picture of your odometer. So those are pretty, from a security aspect, very good. But from an administrative aspect, it could be difficult as far as the compliance and making sure that there is no evasion in that. Because how do you know when somebody's exceeded their miles and their mileage permit? It's really a kind of an honor system at this point. Or are they, the time permit again? You need to be able to enforce. How do you know when people are going to re-up on their time permit? From the technological aspect of it, the plug-in device, the mileage meter that goes into your OBD2 port, was the highest participants. That's where most of the people went, was to that OBD2 port device, with and without location capabilities. We know it works. They do use it up in Oregon. But looking into the future, as vehicles evolve more and more in vehicle telematics and just technology itself evolving, relying on or building a system around just this OBD2 port device could be blocking us into something that is not cutting edge and could be obsolete by the time we even launch a statewide program, if that were the direction the state wants to go. So it is a viable solution, but is it something that we want to put all our eggs into that basket at this point? It's up for debate. The in-vehicle telematics is probably where we see the most flexibility and movement in the automotive industry. As more and more vehicles are having the in-vehicle telematics, having Wi-Fi, there is more opportunity to integrate a road charge within that system, in their systems, and being able to communicate from vehicle to infrastructure. But there are some drawbacks. What we saw in the pilot, in order to participate in using the in-vehicle telematics, you had to have a subscription. Well, first of all, your vehicle had to be equipped to do it. You had to have a subscription to that service. Now, if you have a new vehicle, it's probably part of your package for 3 years. But if you have an older vehicle or you bought a used vehicle that has in-vehicle telematics, you would have to purchase a subscription. One of our participants did do that. They went and bought a subscription so they could participate using the in-vehicle telematics. So there's that obstacle. The other obstacle is you had to provide your login credentials to the commercial account manager. So that required you to give your your password and your user ID, which is would kind of make me kind of feel icky. I don't have a vehicle with in-vehicle telematics, so but I think that is an issue that needs to be resolved as to how do we access that information without having to get that personally identifiable information or your login credentials to be able to just pull that data down. And one of the other aspects of it is the GPS or your location-based aspect of it. Right now, the vehicles, they have that capability. They have the location base because obviously you get your GPS location and mapping in your vehicle, but it doesn't provide that automatically for a road charge. So we weren't able to really identify when you were driving out of state or off-road. It had to be, in order to do that, you have to ping or query the car to pull that data out, and that constant pinging or querying the car is very expensive. So there's got to be some other solution to, the mapping, not only just for in-vehicle telematics, but in general, the mapping needs to be clear. And so, there are advantages of in-vehicle telematics, but there is a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of communications with the auto manufacturers and whoever for being able to access that. The smartphone application, it does have potential. I don't know if you recall when we were talking about the smartphone app during the TAC days, it was envisioned that it would be Bluetooth. It would be Bluetooth enabled, so it would sync up with your vehicle, and so there was this automatic pairing, and it knew. Well, we didn't have that capability. So we had to go a different way with a smartphone. So you downloaded an app, and the app would be running, and it would be recording your miles that you're driving around. Well, what happens if I'm the passenger in somebody else's car, or I'm on a bus, or I'm on a train? So there's a difficulty of identifying the vehicle with the app and the mileage on the smartphone with the vehicle. So we had to do another layer of verification, doing a picture of your odometer on a monthly basis. So it would true it up with what the miles that they showed on your smartphone app and what was really on your odometer. And that was the only way of using the smartphone app. So we see that there's potential there if you could actually do that pairing with your vehicle. So that was a long one, sorry. So back to the technology. I guess I jumped right ahead and did the technology side, but you can see that, that we did offer quite a bit of technology. Majority of participants selected a technological option. Of those, the 83% that chose technology, 62% did a GPS enabled or a location aware device. So kind of shows you that, there is that willingness to use the location services, but again, it is a small pilot, a bunch of probably early adopters that aren't that concerned about it, but there is an incentive from the commercial account managers to do location-based because of the other services, value-added services that they provide, but also they're looking at other things that they could pair with it, such as user-based insurance, or even, you're driving down the 15 and your gas level is low. It can detect that and then give you, say, there's X gas station in 5 miles, or if your charging is low, hey, there's a charging station at the next rest stop, or, so there are some benefits to having the GPS value added for the future users. And I think our participants really did appreciate having some of the aspects of the value added. There was some competition going on about, who has the best driving record. And so there is that gamification. So next steps, as we kind of closed out the pilot, we realized that there's a lot of additional study that needs to be done. There are, we looked at all the different mileage reporting and technology methods, and all of them work. They all work to some degree. It depends on, how much is it going to cost for the state of California to administer, what can we do to look at efficiencies to be able to reduce that cost. So, we have talked to you about this, of the pay at the pump charging station, FAST Act work that we are working on right now, which is really investigating whether a pay at the pump option is a viable option in California or for a road charge in general. And the first step in that is doing a request for interest, and pretty much trying to see if there's the technology initiative out there. Is there something technological in Silicon Valley or wherever that has an idea of how we can communicate between our vehicle and the infrastructure? And we had to title it pay at the pump, but it might not necessarily be a pay at the pump. It could be a pay at, some way of communicating between vehicles or between infrastructure or to the station. It's just trying to get the best idea of how we can collect this information make it a cost-effective way. So we've got the pay at the pump. Revenue collection is something that we think that needs further study for the pilot itself. We didn't collect any revenue. We did a simulated revenue collection. We know how it kind of flows through the system, but we don't necessarily know how big of an impact it'll have on the agencies involved. So we would like to be able to, if there is a pay at the pump demonstration we can do, maybe do a revenue collection in concert with that pay at the pump. It'll be a small, study that could just at least demonstrate that aspect of it. As I mentioned, the in-vehicle telematics and all the issues that we have, we want to use this, but there are some hurdles, so we need a little more study in that general area. A technology collaborative. We thought it would be a good idea to have a academic, government, local, federal, state, have private sector involved in a technology collaborative to talk about, okay, what are the projects that are going on in the state, technological projects, but also what is the private sector? What can they bring to the table? And how can we build a system that is not antiquated by the time we are able to launch it? It needs to be something that's very nimble and can move through the process and be able to be changed as needed. And then the organizational considerations. As you know, for our pilot program, we looked at a very high level, how could this be organized within the state? Where would a road charge reside? And so we need to do a little deeper study on that. We are doing some of it through our FAST Act grant funds, but there also needs to be, some decision as to where is road charge going to be. And then once that decision's made, then there's the steps that need to be done as far as putting in regulations or specifications and vendors. I mean, it's a very long-term process. So that's why we're saying 2025 might be the year that it could be, if road charge is a viable solution, it could be implemented. On what degree, that's up to, that implementing agency and the legislature, and how do they want to implement it? Is it to transition into a big, everybody who's going to switch over, or is it going to be a very slow process? So those are our next steps, and I'm done. So I will be happy to take your questions.
Wow, that's very comprehensive, and thank you, Carrie. It just shows so much that has been done, and a great recap. Questions from any members or comments from any members of the committee? Yeah, they left. Yep, there we go. Lee.
No, you turned mine on. No, I think right next to your book.
It's going to be one of these.
Okay, maybe it's that one.
All right. Okay, there we go. No, I just wanted to ask about the time permit as a recording or as a payment version. Were people satisfied with the time permits? Is that is the least technological method, right? So I assume and the one that is arguably the most privacy preserving, because it does not even require the state to know how many miles you've driven. So I assume that's going to be that is something that we're continuing on.
Right. The time permit in the pilot, we didn't have a lot of participants that opted in for the manual options, but of those that did, they were satisfied with the time permit. The one problem that we did encounter is compliance, because they bought a time permit for, I don't remember, 60, 90, 120 days. I have to go back and look, but when it was time for them to re-up, we got a lot of people falling off because, there's no money involved. That's where the compliance issue comes in, is how do you make sure that they are going to renew their time permit? And for the pilot's purpose, we had to do pretty extensive emailing them or contacting them on a, once it expired, almost on a daily basis to get them to re-sign up. So that's where the difficulty comes in the time permit, but it's not something, it was very low cost to administer other than that compliance aspect.
Any other questions? Yeah. Susan?
So I guess I've been thinking about just what we talked about in May, where, put $20 on number 5. So, and then I was thinking with this telematics, I just was wondering if the technology is going in this direction at all, which would be that possibly, like, let's say you pull in and you have a gas car at this point, and there's some kind of telematics on the car, or maybe it's a plug-in thing that can keep track of how many miles since the last time you filled up. So it has to be filled a little bit with, it has to be associated with the gas tank, I guess. And so it doesn't have to be personal. It doesn't matter if your name's Joe or Mary. It's this car just drove 75 miles or 130. And, and then, and I can imagine the gas station thing saying something like, this is what you're being charged gas tax, this is what you're not being charged, like almost calculates, particularly for the marketing element of it in the beginning, so people relax a little bit about it and realize it's kind of replacing. This is what your gas tax would have been, and this is your bill. Because it's, that could just capture when you care, because you don't care other times, but when you want gas in your car, you care. So I was just thinking that possibly, I don't know if people I'm asking and just sort of suggesting, if not, are people looking at something along those lines?
That's exactly what we want to be looking at in our pay at the pump, is just that type of technology where it is really, it's so easy. You just get out of your car and pump it, and it's almost like you have a prepaid wallet attached to your vehicle, and you don't even have to put in a card or anything because it'll take it out of that prepaid wallet. There was a study done by Honda, Visa, and Gilbarco. The Gilbarco provides the infrastructure, the pump infrastructure in the Bay Area that did just that, where it was the Honda would pull up to the pump. I don't know, you want to explain it, Brady?
Sure. Yeah, essentially the car would pull up to the pump, and there'd be a wireless handshake between the vehicle and the pump infrastructure. And it's already been proven. It was a proof of concept at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. It's done every year. In fact, auto manufacturers attending that show has increased substantially. Almost 40% of vendors at the show now are auto manufacturers. And so electronics certainly are entering the vehicle, and we see it kind of being as seamless as using Apple Pay, Android Pay, things like that. Today you can go and wirelessly pay for a transaction at the point of sale without ever having to pull your card out of your wallet. You can use your smartphone for that kind of stuff. Well, our vehicles are becoming just as smart as our phones, and so we see that certainly being something that we should investigate further and be mindful as we move forward with this research.
I just want to comment back a moment. So, you kind of took it one step farther to the Apple Pay, or sort of like a prepaid credit card type of thing. But, and maybe that's fine. But for people who are kind of distrustful, it just seems like almost like what we do today. You put your credit card in there, you see how much gas it is, we've learned to trust that reasonably. It could almost be that same thing. So it feels very much the same. And possibly the vendors, or the people who design the gas, where you can get it, could have information, this is what you charge vehicle miles. And like I said, possibly even, I think this could calm some people down, this is what you didn't pay in gas tax. So, and if it's reasonably equivalent, it'll feel like, oh, okay, I've done this before. And so it'll feel normal. Just a suggestion.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Carrie, very much. Appreciate that. Why don't we move to the next item on the agenda, which is number 8, and it would be the update from Caltrans, and Norma Ortega is going to give us the update on what Caltrans has been up to on road charge.
Okay, thank you. So
California, I've mentioned before, is a member of the 14 Western States Road User Charge Consortium. All Western states and a number of other states across the nation are looking at the impact of fuel efficiency on the revenue stream and the ability to maintain their roads. And so California, along with Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, North Dakota, Idaho, Colorado, Texas, Montana, did I mention Arizona, Nevada, Oklahoma, and New Mexico are part of this consortium. We're pooling our research dollars to study different issues related to this whole concept of paying by the mile. We have completed a number of studies. What is the impact of user fee to rural residents? Privacy, the protection of privacy is one that obviously impacts every state and is a leading policy issue. The issue of how do you share information between states when you may start a trip in California and then you travel to Nevada, and a number of other kind of technology type questions. We had a quarterly meeting in September up in Oregon, and Oregon co-hosted a forum. They had two different tracks. One was a technology track and another one were policy discussions. So it was very well attended. We had a lot of different folks from throughout the U.S. attending to learn more about these concepts and begin the dialogue kind of a little broader than the U.S. We will be hosting the quarterly meeting coming up in February here in California, and we will share some of that information with you as it gets a little bit closer. In addition to that, the Mileage-Based User Fee Alliance, which is more of a national level and is based out of Washington, D.C., will host a meeting coming up later next week. And that group is made up of not only state governments, but also some vendors, contractors, policy folks, as well as research folks. And we will be meeting with U.S. DOT officials to talk further about some of the work that's going on in Washington and the money that the federal government is providing to look into this issue. I think Carrie's going to talk a little bit more about the different pilots that have been funded so far, as well as the work that California is doing with Oregon to look into interoperability between different states. So with that, I could take questions or turn it over to Carrie.
Any questions first for Norma? Otherwise, we'll go to Carrie.
Okay.
Carrie?
It's me again. So the FAST Act is, if you recall, was released or approved by the Senate and the legislature and at the federal level in December of 2015. And part of that, the FAST Act included funding to look at sustainable transportation funding, and where road charge kind of falls into that pocket. There are, it's a 5-year program. It was $95 million. Year one was a $15 million grant was solicited as well. And this year, in 2017, it was a $20 million grant opportunity. The eligibility is for state or group of states to participate. So in 2016, 8 states were awarded FAST Act funding. Of those states, it was California, Delaware, which was the I-95 corridor, Hawaii, Minnesota, Missouri, Oregon, Ruck West, as well as Washington. Part of the grants, of course, we were part of multiple grants. We have our own grant, which we are doing a pay at the pump study, as well as organizational design and compliance study, and putting together a public outreach campaign or a plan as to how to communicate road charge or user-based mileage to the general public. The plan that we're putting together for education is a multi-layered, so there is the why do we need, or how is gas tax, how are the highways, the infrastructure funded? Because what we found through our pilot is the majority of folks did not understand how transportation was funded. The second step, the second tier of the process is the, why are we here? Why is it that we have a crisis or we need to find a solution? And then the third tier is, what is a solution? Road charge is one of those. It could be something else. So we're not trying to be prescriptive as to it's going to be a road charge, but we certainly want to put some education campaign or outreach together. We're not doing any actual campaign effort in this fiscal year. It will be in some future fiscal years. So it's just a plan. And then round 2, pay at the pump, charging station demonstration. We did submit an application in June of this year. Were awarded in August for doing a pay at the pump demonstration. And what we're envisioning is a very small pilot, geographically small pilot, as well as vehicle. It is really wanting to see whether or not a pay at the pump technology, like we discussed, is a viable solution, and reporting it back to the federal government. So the Rec West states, we are part of a Rec West grant application. We were part of Part 1 and Part 2, 2016 and 2017. Right now, during this phase of 2016, we're putting together the pilot planning documents. This is all things that you've already been through with putting together the ICD and the SRS and all those documents with acronyms for how does this system work, how are our states going to communicate across state lines, and it is an ongoing effort. There are 4 states within the 11 states that are participating in phase 2 of the pilot, or it's not round 2. There are 2 parts to round 1. It's the kind of putting the groundwork together, and the second part is really getting all of the systems in place. We're hoping to learn from all of the different states pilots that have gone on and are being conducted now as to feeding into this program. Also, for round 2 is a demonstration. We want to be able to demonstrate interoperability between California and Oregon. It's not only, the technology interoperability, but it's also the revenue collection. How do we do it? How do we, is it one state that collects and distributes, or is it a clearinghouse? And the final report kind of discusses that. How do we put together a system of multiple states? This is going to actually demonstrate a multiple state. Now, we did do it for our pilot, but it was just a paper exercise. This would be actually doing the collection of revenue between the 2 states. So that's what we're doing with Rec West. I'll go back because I didn't really talk about what the other states are doing. So Delaware is doing user fees based on onboard mileage counters. Mostly they're focusing on the trucking industry along the I-95 corridor. Hawaii is doing a user-based collection system, which is, again, they have annual inspections, so it kind of is a natural, they have to go in, annual inspection, and then they would have this road charge true up on an annual basis. So they are demonstrating a program like that. Minnesota is looking at the use of mobility as a service, as a revenue collection method. So it's more putting it in line of it's just another service like your utilities, shared economy. Then Oregon has their own funding that they are getting. Oregon is going to be kind of improving their existing Origo program that's up there. And then Washington is doing a interoperability multi-jurisdictional, so they are going international, so going across the border to British Columbia or Vancouver, Vancouver, and then also with Oregon. So they're doing an interoperability aspect of it. So the 2017 awards was Colorado. You know, they did do a very small pilot with their own revenue, not a FAST Act grant funds. They want to build on that and do an additional investigation of data collection. Delaware is getting additional funds to do a study on equity and privacy issues. Missouri is going to conduct a public outreach and concerns, and Oregon is going to develop even more improvements to their existing program. And then we have the Ruck West, and then Washington is going to conduct a public outreach. And my conversations with the Ruck West states, mostly Oregon and Washington, is what can we do together that we can leverage the state funds, the federal funds, and this public outreach effort. I mean, because we all have that same aspect that's impacting our programs, is the general understanding of how transportation is funded and why we have a problem and what can we do about it, and trying to get the public engaged in the process. It's really, you know, we can be in the background doing the technology and all the things that revolve around actually implementing, but not bringing the public along is a disservice. So we need to be able to go out and have a very robust communications effort, and being at multi-state and at the national level. I will be, or one of us will be attending the TRB meeting where there's the federal government, FHWA, is having a meeting of all the recipient states for federal funds to see what we can do to collaborate better and be able to share information, so we're not reinventing the wheel in every state, trying to advance the conversation instead of redoing the same study or same demonstration, making sure that we're really moving this forward instead of kind of treading water. So that is what's happening.
Lots going on, and clearly when you see what's happening, you know, and again, being respectful of those that commented at the beginning of the meeting, you know, the federal government wouldn't be looking at this, and all these states wouldn't be looking at this if we didn't have a serious problem with what's looking at long term with the gas tax, especially if we see 25 years from now, you know, you've got half the vehicles on the road are electric or some kind of non-fuel. Obviously, we've got to continue to figure out ways to fund our roads to be able to get to work, to be able to get freight moved, et cetera. Any comments or questions beyond that for Carrie? Yeah, Supervisor?
So with all of these states starting these further studies or new studies, it's going to be interesting to see and get feedback from them. So for instance, looking at the Missouri, where they're charging a fee based on the miles per gallon of the vehicle. When you take a look at equity issues, you could have two people with vehicles that each get 60 miles per gallon. One driver's retired and he drives 1,000 miles a year, and he's paying the same fee then as somebody who's a salesperson who drives 52,000 miles a year. And they're also paying one time with their registration at, you know, when they register their vehicle, as opposed to like the gas tax, which is spread out during the year. So getting feedback from some of the states that are enacting some of the real interesting types of programs for VMT is going to be interesting. Also, the feedback will be very telling with regard to looking at the different states and the interoperability between the different states, and then whenever it gets rolled out, you know, perhaps at a federal level, whether the same vehicle miles traveled fee would be the same for each state or different based upon what each state needs for their road funds, and then how you're going to collect the data and keep track of the payments. If you don't have the GPS option and you cross the state line going from California to Oregon, for instance, then how do you keep track of the miles if you're a California resident when you go into Oregon and then when you come back for those Oregon miles at X cents? So it'll be interesting. We want to make sure that we gather all the data so that in the end we can give all this information to the legislature and figure out best practices for moving forward. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor or Professor?
There was a pay-at-the-pump demonstration in Oregon, and my question, a very simple question, is how is the California pilot of a pay-at-the-pump going to differ? Is it going to use similar technology? Has the technology advanced and changed? Is there a plan in place that is sufficiently advanced that we could see it, that it could be shared with us?
So that's really part of our work that we're doing this year with the FAST Act funds, is to investigate and see if there is other technology, because Oregon study was maybe 10 years ago, and it was very cost prohibitive because each vehicle had to be retrofitted or had a device in it. Each pump had to be retrofitted. So we're thinking, in 10 years, a lot has changed. Look at your smartphone. Things have changed so dramatically that there is probably a technology out there that maybe they haven't thought of yet or have parts of it for other purposes, but being able to research that, that's really the point of our request for information, is to see if there is that technology out there and can we test it.
Yeah, in fact, that was the one thing that Jim Whitty kept saying, is that when they tried the pay-at-the-pump model, the technology we have today just didn't exist, which just proves why this thing is an evolving effort. Will end up becoming just built into vehicles as we move forward. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much, Carrie. We'll next move to item 9 on the agenda, and this is from the Executive Director of the Transportation Commission, Susan Branson, and she's going to give us an update with regard to CTC's annual report to the legislature. Susan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee members, the California Transportation Commission is charged annually to develop and issue recommendations to the legislature and a report also on its accomplishments in the current fiscal year. And the California Transportation Commission is charged with advising the legislature as well as the administration on transportation policy issues and areas in which maybe require further study, or areas that would, if legislation were to be enacted, it would provide improvements to the transportation program in California. And so with that, we know, this committee knows, and the California Transportation Commission is aware, that states, as Carrie just mentioned, states are exploring, and Norma as well, a road charge. It's happening nationally. We know that California has received federal grants for further exploration of road charge, various road charge mechanisms. We know that looking at a methodology to actually replace the gas tax is a long-term endeavor that all the states are undertaking in studying, and that further study is required. So with that, recognizing that, the California Transportation Commission truly has valued your volunteering to be a part of this technical advisory committee. You each bring a level of expertise that is invaluable to advise the commission in its charge in advising the legislature and the administration. This committee also provides a public forum where discussions can take place on what's happening within California and other states as far as the exploration and the considerations that go into looking at a different methodology to replace a tax on gasoline. And so with that, what you'll see before you as a pink item in your materials for this agenda number 9 is the recommendation that the California Transportation Commission is issuing to the legislature next week. And if you go to the bottom of that page, it's essentially stating that the statute that created the Technical Advisory Committee, it sunsets on January 1st, 2019, meaning that this committee would no longer be a statutorily required body. The commission believes that without this body, this committee, there's no way to assure the legislature and the public that they all stay informed on the administration's efforts that are underway. Therefore, the commission believes it is important to maintain this advisory body so long as a road charge is being studied And although the revenue generated as a result of Senate Bill 1 will greatly benefit California's transportation infrastructure, it's important that the legislature continue pursuing other long-term alternatives to replace the existing per-gallon fuel tax, as fuel consumption is expected to steadily decline over the next decade. And this is with regard to such new technologies like the electric vehicles that are continuing to be introduced that are not paying a gas tax at all, as an example. And so what this means is the Commission will be issuing a recommendation to the legislature through their annual report next week. And it's only advisory. The Commission is just an advisory body. Whether the legislative members pick this up as a bill or, that's something that they want to author, we don't know. But I wanted, Chair Madaffer, myself, and the commissioners all wanted to make sure that you were aware of this recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Any questions? Stephen?
Just a quick comment. I think this is an appropriate recommendation going forward. I've always thought ever since this effort started back in 2014 that this was a very long-term issue. I think there were some desires to speed things up for a while, and then that has gone away, and I think that's appropriate. One of my major concerns was always that there would be premature legislation to try to implement something way before its time. So I see this fitting in with that. And given the timing of other recommendations that are going to come out and other issues that are at play, I think keeping this effort to advise going forward makes sense.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, this is really the only place where the public has a chance to come and speak, as we heard today. Any other questions or comments? All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and break for lunch. We'll reconvene here at 12:30.